Of all the things my late husband Arthur and I built together, this small, simple brass key is the one I hold most dear. It doesn't look like much. The teeth are worn smooth from 60 years of turning the lock, and the head, shaped like a simple spade, has lost its shine. But this key, you see, is more than metal. It's a promise. It's the key to our fortress of solitude, the 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Drive that we bought with our wedding money and a prayer back in 1965. Every scratch on its surface is a memory. The time Arthur carried me over the threshold, the day we brought our son Daniel home from the hospital, the countless Christmases with the scent of pine and roasting turkey filling the halls. This key is the keeper of my life's story. And it is the very thing my daughter-in-law Brenda tried to rip from my hands after she slapped me across the face. That's the part that always stuns people. The slap. They imagine some frail, trembling old woman cowering in a corner. But that's not what happened. Oh, I was stunned, I'll give you that. The shock of it was like a lightning strike, hot and white and blinding. But trembling? No. In that moment, something cold and hard and very, very quiet settled deep in my bones. It was the ghost of the woman I used to be before marriage, and motherhood softened my edges. The young woman who had to fight for everything she had. That ghost woke up the moment Brenda's manicured hand cracked across my cheek. And it was that ghost who decided that this war, a war I never wanted, would be fought and won on my terms. It all began so subtly, as most insidious things do. When my Daniel first brought Brenda home, I was thrilled. She was beautiful, with glossy black hair and a smile that could charm a snake out of its basket. She worked in marketing, she said, and she had an air of ambition that I initially mistook for drive. Daniel, my sweet, gentle Daniel, was utterly besotted. He's always been a follower, a peacekeeper, and Brenda's sharp, decisive nature seemed to complete him. For 5 years, our lives were a portrait of familial bliss. They'd come for Sunday dinner every week. Brenda would bring an expensive bottle of wine, compliment my pot roast, and ask about my garden club. We'd sit on the porch swing Arthur built, watching their daughter, my precious granddaughter Lily, chase fireflies on the lawn. The first crack appeared about 6 months after Arthur passed away. I was still drowning in grief, the house feeling like a cavernous, empty shell. One Sunday, Brenda was helping me clear the table. "You know, Eleanor," she began, her voice syrupy sweet, "this house is an awful lot for one person. All this dusting. The stairs must be murder on your knees." I paused, a Delftware plate in my hand. "It's my home, dear. I manage." Of course," she said quickly. "I just worry. Daniel and I were talking, and there are some wonderful new assisted living communities nearby. They're like luxury resorts. They have water aerobics and everything." I placed the plate down with a soft click. "Brenda, I am 72, not 92. I have no intention of leaving my home." She dropped it, but the seed was planted. The comments became more frequent, like little drops of water wearing away at a stone. "Oh, this wallpaper is so vintage. Have you ever thought about an open-concept kitchen? We could knock down this wall. The property taxes on this place must be astronomical." Each suggestion was a subtle attempt to reframe my home as a burden, a problem to be solved, rather than the sanctuary it was. Daniel, bless his heart, would just shift uncomfortably. "Now, Brenda, Mum loves the house the way it is," he'd mutter, but without any real conviction. He hated conflict, and Brenda was the undisputed queen of our little kingdom. The next escalation came disguised as concern for my finances. Brenda and Daniel had a lifestyle that always seemed a bit beyond their means. He was a mid-level manager at a logistics firm, and she was, Well, I was never entirely sure what her marketing job entailed, but it seemed to involve a lot of lunches and new outfits. "Eleanor, we've been looking at your portfolio," Brenda announced one afternoon, waving a sheaf of papers she'd plucked from my desk while I was making tea. I felt a flash of anger at the invasion of privacy. "The returns are just sluggish. You're sitting on a gold mine with this house. The equity is insane. If you were to sell, you could invest the money and live like a queen. Travel. See the world." "I saw the world with my husband," I said, my voice cooler than I intended. "This is where I want to be." "But it's not a liquid asset," she insisted, her voice gaining a sharp edge. "It's just sitting here." It was then I realized she didn't see a home. She saw a number on a balance sheet. She looked at the walls that held the echoes of my entire adult life and saw only locked-up capital. My Daniel, my own son, just sat there, nodding along. "She has a point, Mum. It would give you more security." "I have all the security I need, Daniel," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Your father made sure of that." But I was wrong. The greatest threat to my security was sitting right across from me, smiling her crocodile smile. The final straw, the event that led to the slap, was a business venture. A ridiculously foolish one. Brenda had a vision. She wanted to start a subscription box service for artisanal, ethically sourced pet accessories. Designer dog collars and organic catnip. She'd drawn up a business plan that was all buzzwords and no substance. They needed $100,000 to launch. The bank, quite sensibly, had laughed at them. So they came to me. It was a Tuesday evening. They showed up unannounced, a tactic Brenda often used to catch me off guard. Lily was with them, a little angel with her father's kind eyes. While Lily watched cartoons in the den, they laid it all out on the dining room table, where I had once helped Daniel with his homework. "It's a can't-miss opportunity, Mum," Daniel said, his eyes wide with a desperate, borrowed enthusiasm. "We'll pay you back with interest, Eleanor, of course," Brenda added smoothly. "Think of it as an investment in your family's future, in Lily's future." Using my granddaughter against me. A classic Brenda move. I looked at the glossy, amateurish proposal. I'd spent my career as a head librarian for the city. I know how to research. I know how to spot a flimsy argument. This wasn't a business plan. It was a child's wish list. "No," I said simply. The air in the room changed. Brenda's smile tightened. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean the answer is no. This is not a sound investment, and I will not risk my security, the security Arthur and I built, on a whim." "A whim?" She scoffed, her voice rising. "This is my career. This is our future." "A future you expect me to bankroll," I said, my own resolve hardening. "The answer is no." Daniel looked panicked, caught between his wife's fury and my refusal. "Mum, please, just listen." "I have listened, Daniel, and I've made my decision." Brenda stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. Her face was a mask of fury. The charming facade had crumbled, revealing the ugly, grasping greed beneath. "You selfish old woman," she hissed. "You're just sitting here in this big, empty house, hoarding everything Arthur left you while your own son struggles." "Struggles?" I stood up too, my hands flat on the table. "Your husband has a good job. You have a new car. You take expensive vacations. You send Lily to a private preschool. If you are struggling, it is because your wants have outpaced your means. That is not my problem to solve." "This house is our problem to solve," she shrieked. "It's our inheritance. We're just trying to get it a little early. Why should we have to wait until you die?" The cruelty of her words sucked the air from my lungs. I saw Daniel flinch, a flicker of shame in his eyes, but he said nothing. He did nothing. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice low and trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. We're not going anywhere, Brenda spat, stepping closer to me. Her eyes were wild. You are going to help us. This house is as good as ours anyway. We're going to be living here one day, so you might as well get used to it. She was right in front of me now, her perfume cloying and aggressive. I could feel the heat coming off her. This is my house, I said, enunciating every word. You will never live here, not while I draw breath. And that's when it happened. Her hand came up so fast I didn't have time to react. The crack of it hitting my cheek echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. My head snapped to the side, and a sharp, stinging pain bloomed across my skin. For a moment the world went white. I tasted copper in my mouth. When my vision cleared, I saw her standing there, her chest heaving. And then she said the words that sealed her fate. Now, she said, her voice dripping with venomous triumph, give me the keys. We're moving in. You can have the guest room. We'll take care of you. It's time we made the decisions around here. She held out her hand, palm up, expectant. I looked at her outstretched hand. I looked at my son, who stood frozen by the door, his face pale and slack with shock, a portrait of pathetic inaction. He didn't rush to my side. He didn't scream at his wife. He just stood there. In that single, awful moment, I didn't just lose respect for Brenda. I lost the son I thought I knew. Something inside me shifted. The pain in my cheek was a distant thing. The grief, the hurt, the betrayal. They all crystallized into a single, sharp point of clarity. I was alone in this fight, and I would not lose. I slowly raised my head and looked Brenda right in the eye. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I gave her a smile. It was a terrible, thin-lipped smile that didn't reach my eyes. You'll get what's coming to you, Brenda, I whispered. I promise you that. Then I turned, walked to the phone in the hallway, and dialed 911. I'd like to report an assault, I said calmly into the receiver, never taking my eyes off her horrified face. And a trespassing. The arrival of the police was a blur of flashing lights and hushed official voices. Brenda, to her credit, was a fantastic actress. She immediately burst into tears, claiming I was confused, that I'd fallen and hit my face, that I was having a dementia-fueled episode. She accused me of being a danger to myself. But the red handprint on my cheek was undeniable. The officers were polite, but firm. They took my statement. They took a very flustered one from Brenda, and a stammering, incoherent one from Daniel. Because I wasn't pressing charges at that exact moment, a strategic decision, they simply escorted them from the property, warning them not to return without my express permission. The moment their car pulled away, the adrenaline left me, and my legs gave out. I sank onto the bottom step of my staircase, and finally let the tears come. Not tears of sadness, but of cold, hard fury. They hadn't just attacked me, they had attacked Arthur's memory. They had desecrated our home with their greed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Arthur's old leather armchair, the police report on the table beside me, and I planned. Brenda thought this was a battle of wills, a family squabble. She was wrong. This was a war, and I was about to deploy a weapon she had no defense against: patience, intelligence, and the law. The next morning, at precisely 9 a.m., I called Mr. Peterson. George Peterson had been Arthur's lawyer and our friend for over 40 years. He was a shrewd, sharp-as-a-tack man who had guided us through every major financial decision of our lives. "George," I said, my voice steady, "I need your help. I'm going to war." I told him everything. The subtle digs, the financial pressure, the failed business venture, the slap, the demand for my keys. I didn't leave out a single detail. He listened without interruption, a series of quiet grunts his only response. When I finished, There was a long pause. "Eleanor," he finally said, his voice grim. Arthur would be spinning in his grave. "All right, here's what we're going to do. First, you will go to your doctor this morning and have him document the injury to your face. Get photos. Second, you are not to speak with Daniel or Brenda under any circumstances. All communication goes through me. Third, I want you to gather every financial document you have. Bank statements, deeds, Arthur's will, everything. I'll be at your house at 2 o'clock." Following his instructions gave me a sense of purpose. The doctor was horrified, and his nurse took several clear, damning photos of the bruise blooming on my cheek. At 2, George arrived, his briefcase bulging. We sat at my dining room table, the very scene of the crime, and spread out the architecture of my life. The will was simple. Everything went to me. Upon my death, it would be split evenly between Daniel and a trust for Lily. The house, however, was in my name alone. This was our fortress. "They want the house, George," I said. "They feel entitled to it." "Entitlement is not a legal position," he grunted, poring over the deed. "But they'll make your life a living hell, Eleanor. They'll try to have you declared incompetent. Brenda sounds like a real piece of work." "She is," I agreed, "but she's also arrogant, and her greed is a weakness. We can use that." And so, the plan was born. It was a quiet, methodical, and utterly ruthless plan. Phase 1. The rope. George advised me to give them rope, and plenty of it. The first step was a carefully worded letter from his office. It stated that due to the recent unfortunate incident, I would be ceasing all direct contact. It also said that, after much consideration, while I could not in good conscience fund their business, I was willing to offer them a one-time gift of $20,000 to help with their financial pressures, with the hope that this gesture would mend the familial rift. I balked at first. Give them money? After what they did? "Eleanor, trust me," George said, a sly look in his eye. "This isn't a gift, it's bait. It does 2 things. First, it makes you look like the magnanimous, forgiving mother. If they ever try to claim you're mentally unstable, this letter will be Exhibit A for your sound and generous mind. Second, and more importantly, it will come with a document they have to sign." The document was a masterpiece. It was a simple receipt of the gift, but buried in the legal jargon was a clause. By accepting the money, they acknowledged that it was a full and final settlement of any and all perceived familial financial obligations on my part, and they formally relinquished any future claim or petition against my personal assets or estate during my lifetime. Brenda, blinded by the sight of $20,000, made Daniel sign it without a second thought. They saw it as the first crack in my resolve, a down payment on their eventual inheritance. They had no idea they were signing away their entire strategy. They took the money and, predictably, didn't use it to pay down debt. They leased a new, flashier car and took a weekend trip to a spa resort. I knew this because I had hired a discreet private investigator, a former cop George recommended, to document their expenditures. Every frivolous purchase was another nail in their coffin. Phase 2. The fortress. While they were busy spending my gift, George and I were restructuring my entire life. We moved all my liquid assets into a series of trusts that were ironclad. But the house was the main prize. "We're going to create an irrevocable living trust," George explained. "You will be the trustee, with the right to live in and control the property for the rest of your life, undisturbed. We will name a successor trustee. I would suggest my firm to keep it impartial. And we will name the beneficiary." "Lily," I said without hesitation. "Lily," he agreed. "But with conditions. The trust will only transfer the deed to her upon her 30th birthday. and only if she has completed a college degree or a trade school certification. Until then, the trust will manage the property. This protects the house from any future husband she might have, and it ensures she is mature enough to handle it. And most importantly, it means that the house is no longer technically your asset. It belongs to the trust. Daniel and Brenda cannot touch it. They cannot force a sale. They cannot inherit it. They cannot do a thing. The day I signed those papers, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. The house was safe. Arthur's legacy was safe. My home was truly a fortress once more. For the next 8 months, I lived in quiet solitude. I changed my phone number. I installed a security system with cameras. The private investigators' reports continued to arrive, painting a picture of mounting desperation. The $20,000 was long gone. Their credit card debt was spiraling. The artisanal pet accessory business had never even launched. The calls started coming to George's office, first polite, then demanding, then outright threatening. Daniel, propelled by Brenda's fury, wanted to know why I wasn't answering my phone. He demanded a meeting. George finally agreed. "It's time for the checkmate, Eleanor," he said. The meeting was to be held at George's office, a neutral ground. I arrived early and sat in an adjacent conference room with a one-way mirror. George wanted me to see their faces. They walked in, looking haggard and angry. Brenda's expensive clothes seemed to hang off her, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Daniel looked like a ghost. "Where is she?" Brenda demanded, skipping any pleasantries. "Mrs. Vance is not here," George said calmly, gesturing for them to sit. "She has authorized me to speak on her behalf. What can I do for you?" "What you can do," Brenda snapped, "is tell that mother of his to stop playing games. We're in trouble. We need her help. We need to sell the house." "I'm afraid that's not possible," George said, folding his hands on the desk. "Don't tell me it's not possible." Brenda leaned forward, her voice rising. "It's Daniel's inheritance. We have a right." "Actually," George said, his voice as mild as ever, "you don't. The house is no longer Mrs. Vance's personal property. It was placed in an irrevocable trust 8 months ago. She no longer owns it." I watched through the glass as the colour drained from Brenda's face. Daniel just stared, his mouth slightly agape. "What? What does that mean?" Daniel stammered. "It means," George explained slowly as if to a child, "that the house belongs to the Vance family trust. Your mother is the lifetime trustee, allowing her to live there, but she cannot sell it. Upon her passing, the trust will continue to manage the property until the sole beneficiary, your daughter Lily, turns 30. Brenda's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to pure, unadulterated rage. "You're lying. She can't do that. We'll fight it. We'll take her to court. We'll prove she's incompetent, that you manipulated her." George sighed and opened a file on his desk. "I was hoping you'd say that. You see, any claim of incompetence would be difficult to prove. For example, here is a statement from her physician, dated the day after you assaulted her, confirming she was in perfect mental and physical health, aside from the contusion on her face caused by a direct blow." He slid a copy of the doctor's report, complete with the glossy photos of my bruised cheek, across the desk. Daniel let out a small, strangled gasp. "Furthermore," George continued, his voice hardening, "any claim of manipulation would be countered by this document, which you both signed." He slid over the gift agreement. "In it, you accept $20,000 and relinquish all future claims." A judge might wonder why an incompetent woman was capable of executing such a shrewd legal maneuver. He might also wonder what happened to that $20,000. He then produced a folder, thick with the private investigators' reports. "We have itemized receipts for the lease on a new Audi, a weekend at the Monarch Spa, $300 worth of clothing from Nordstrom." It goes on. It would appear to any court that your mother made a good faith effort to help you, and you squandered it. The optics, as you might say in marketing, Brenda, are not good. Brenda was speechless. Her face was a mottled red and white. She was breathing in short, sharp gasps. You old witch, she finally choked out, looking around the room as if she expected me to materialize from the walls. And finally, George said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, should you persist in any legal action or attempt to harass Mrs. Vance in any way, she will be forced to press charges for the initial assault. The police report was filed. The evidence is documented. With the corroborating evidence of your financial motivations, a district attorney might find the case quite compelling. Elder abuse is a serious felony. Checkmate. I watched as the reality of their situation crashed down on them. They had nothing. No leverage, no legal standing, no inheritance to look forward to. They had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered. Brenda shot Daniel a look of such pure hatred that I almost felt sorry for him. He was a weak man, and he had tied his fortunes to a viper. She stood up, knocking her chair over. "This isn't over," she hissed, though the threat was empty. She stormed out of the room. Daniel remained, his head in his hands. He looked up at George, his eyes swimming with tears. "I don't understand," he whispered. "She's my mother. Why would she do this to me?" George looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You should ask yourself what you did to her, son. Now, I suggest you leave." The fallout was swift and brutal. Karma, I've found, isn't always a lightning bolt from the heavens. Sometimes it's a slow, grinding avalanche of consequences you set in motion yourself. Brenda's rage, with no outlet toward me, turned fully on Daniel. Their marriage, which was built on the shaky foundation of future wealth, crumbled into dust. Within 6 months, she had filed for divorce. She took him for everything she could, but there wasn't much to take. Their debts were astronomical. The new Audi was repossessed. They lost their rented townhouse. Brenda moved back in with her parents in another state, taking Lily with her. Daniel hit rock bottom. He lost his job due to the stress and distraction of the divorce. He ended up renting a room in a boarding house on the bad side of town. The proud, handsome son I had raised was gone, replaced by a broken, humbled man. About a year after the meeting in George's office, my doorbell rang. I looked at the security camera feed and saw Daniel standing on my porch. He was thinner, and his clothes were worn. It was the first time he had come here since that terrible night. I hesitated for a long moment, then I disarmed the alarm and opened the door. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stood there, shuffling his feet like a schoolboy. "Mum," he said, his voice hoarse. Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him pass. The house was quiet, filled with the late afternoon sun. He walked into the living room and just stood there, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece. Me and Arthur on our wedding day. Him as a little boy on his first bicycle. Lily's first-grade school picture. "She's gone," he said quietly. "Brenda. She left. Took Lily." "I know," I said. He finally turned to look at me. His eyes were full of a pain so deep it ached to see. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I was weak. I was a coward. I let her poison everything. I stood there and watched her hit you. I did nothing. I will never forgive myself for that." He broke down then, great, shuddering sobs that shook his entire body. I didn't go to him. I didn't comfort him. I let him cry it out. It was a poison that needed to come out. When he was finished, he wiped his eyes on his sleeve. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. I had to say it." I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the small, framed photo of Arthur that I kept there. "Your father was a strong man," I said. my voice soft. He was kind and gentle, but he was strong. He would have never, ever allowed anyone to dishonor his family. He would have been so disappointed, Daniel. The words were hard, but they were true, and he needed to hear them. He nodded, unable to speak. You have a long road back, I told him. You need to find a job. You need to get your own place. You need to become a man your daughter can be proud of, a man who can fight for her in that custody battle you're about to have. You cannot do any of that while you are drowning in self-pity. It was harsh, but it was the kind of love he needed. Not the coddling he was used to, but a firm, unyielding push toward redemption. He left that day with a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not hope, not yet, but resolve. It's been 3 years since then. Daniel has a steady job again. He lives in a small, clean apartment. He sees Lily every other weekend. He's fighting for more custody. He calls me every Sunday just to talk. Our relationship is not what it was. There's a scar there, a reminder of the chasm that opened between us. But it is healing. Forgiveness is a slow, creeping vine, but it is growing. As for me, I am at peace. My house is quiet. It smells of lemon polish and old books, just as it always has. My days are filled with gardening, my book club, and video calls with my beautiful granddaughter Lily, who knows nothing of this sordid story, except that Grandma's house is a safe and happy place. Sometimes, when the house is still and the evening light filters through the windows, I take out this old brass key. I hold it in my palm and feel the weight of it. It's not just a key to a door. It's the key to my independence, my dignity. Brenda wanted to snatch it away, to take my power and my home. But she underestimated the woman who had held it for 60 years. You don't get to my age without learning that a home is not just wood and nails, and that a mother's love, when betrayed, can forge a will as strong and as unforgiving as steel. She slapped my face, but I, in the end, took her entire world, and I would do it again. This house, this key, they are the last promises I made to my Arthur, and I always keep my promises.